Greetings. Welcome to ITR Live. I'm your host, Chris Hagano, and welcome back to another action-packed, fun-filled episode of the Gold Standard in Iowa Conservative Podcast. I got John Hendrickson, as usual, with me today, and we do have a special guest. I think we're supposed to call this a ride-along. I'm not sure what the cool kids call us, but we've got Senator Scott Webster with us today, who has been wanting to be on the podcast for a long time. I've been inviting him to be on the podcast for a long time, and now that session's over, we actually made it happen, so welcome.
Thank you for having me. I watch the podcast all the time.
That's all, and I'm glad you said that because you watch the podcast.
Yes,
you're one of the folks. We're trying to get folks on YouTube, and understand. We need folks on our video platforms because the actual podcast that's old technology, right, John?
That is, yeah.
And Senator might not understand this, but John's sort of the tech wizard around here.
Yeah.
John's absolutely not the tech wizard around here. But anyway, we're excited to have you here. So make sure you like and subscribe on our video platforms or on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcast content from. So we got a lot to cover today, and hopefully it won't take too much of your time. I want to be respectful of it. But are you recuperating from session? Are you back?
I am.
Okay.
Slowly but surely getting back to work. So, but session never ends too, in a way.
That's right. And it's an election year, and I don't think you're on the ballot because you were just elected 2 years ago.
I am not.
But it's still, there's still a lot of activity, and folks want some of your time. Everybody's got an issue. As we try and say, everybody's got their hand out. We don't want anything from you. We just want you to cut taxes. It's easy.
Well, cut taxes, cut regulation. I'm all for
Good.
it.
I want to dive into that a little bit. So you called yourself a rookie earlier, and I don't think that's fair. You're 2 years in. You know where the coffee is. You know where the restrooms are. You know who kind of some of the movers and shakers are. But what did you think about this legislative session? Just give me I'm going to throw it wide open because you have something to compare it to now, right?
Yeah, I would say this session's fast is the way I would, that first funnel hitting so quickly. I think that was a surprising thing to me. And it seemed like last year, maybe because it was my first year, it took forever. In this last session, it's just like, it felt like we were here and we were gone.
Yep. I probably should have started with this, but I guess by way of background, tell folks where you're from, your background before you got to the Senate, what's your day job, some of that stuff. So I should have started with that, but I'm only a part-time podcast host, so I don't do these in order.
From Bettendorf, Iowa. I was on city council there for, I believe, 8 years. And that seemed to fly by.
That's what your bio says is 8 years. So
8 years.
I'm going to go with that.
Yeah, it's probably 8.5. I had a special election, so it's kind of a weird, odd. And then you're out kind of, in January. I was on city council for 8 years there. Home builder from back home. Don't build nearly as many homes as I used to. Other than that, wife, 2 kids, and living the dream of living in Iowa. So I think, that in the local government part gave me a little bit of a heads up, I think, coming in here. Yeah. And the fact that I knew a lot of the people up here, I'd already known Amy St. Clair and Brad Zahn and Jack and, Busalo is from my neck of the woods.
That's right.
Actually from out east. So, I had that availability coming in. It's probably a little bit fearful. When you get a local government guy in sometimes. Yeah. And oddly enough, I'm the guy that runs all the local government preemption bills.
Which we appreciate. Has gone really well so far. Yeah. So, no, I appreciate that. And I was telling John, you may want to jump in at some point, but we were kind of talking about this as, our lengthy coffee time in the morning, which we have branded as the pre-production meeting. Yeah. I was saying, I was like, I've really grown to appreciate Senator Webster because of the local government background, but he's not just doing everything they want.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
You have the perspective that you can sort of see when, okay, guys, I get what you're saying, but we need to go over here. And so that's been really refreshing to get that perspective on it.
Yeah. In a weird way, what I tried to explain to a lot of my caucus members was I kind of know where they hide things and kind of how they do a workaround. So if we pass something, I sat on city council for 8 years, and I kind of made it my point to say, okay, well, they're kind of shifting us here. Let's find a hole in that. So sometimes I know where the holes are and try to fill them before they get down there now. So I think that's where I've tried to use that experience.
Yeah. So. Well, it's been helpful. So I don't want to go too deep on your local government experience, but it does impact what your experiences were, I guess, at the Capitol so far. One of the big things that I wanted to have you come in here and talk about, though, is you and John and I, we've talked about this universal basic income quite a bit. But you were the floor manager of the bill, as you said, to preempt local governments, to prevent them from offering a universal basic income package. So not everybody listens to every episode. So I'm going to let you sort of recap what was going on here, why the bill came forward, what is universal basic income. So set the stage for us.
So it's a long story. I'll try to make it as short as possible so we don't kill a ton of time.
No, it's all right.
Representative Holt ran it over in the House. I saw it hit the floor. And as soon as I saw it pass, I went straight to Senator Schultz and said, I want that bill. Des Moines came up with a program, supposedly using ARPA money. I would contend that every tax dollar is a local government tax dollar at that point in time, which is a property tax dollar, even if it comes from the feds, because you could have used it somewhere else. Instead, now you're backfilling it with property tax dollars. So they came up with a program, and the more I dug into it after I got that particular bill, it became more and more interesting. It was funded with about $865,000 worth of ARPA money. Outside sources also funded it to the tune of about $2.65 million, depending upon which city council meeting you watch. Some people say 2.3, some people say 2.7. I kind of found the math that I found was about $2.65 million. But at the same time, they handed out $1.3 million in $500 checks over the 2 years, or planning on it. So, I first tried to find out if the post office was running this, because that's, a pretty big tab to hand out $1.3 million. But through the program, I found a lot of different things that were a little bit disturbing. Me being a kind of a math guy, they're giving them $500 debit cards is what they're giving them. They could simply go to a grocery store, get a pack of gum, and get the rest out in cash, and that would label it as groceries. The other thing is they're not really tracking everybody's money. So even, coming out of the University of Pennsylvania, you would think they'd track it all. But they're not. They're only tracking that $500. So simply, if somebody's spending $500 on groceries today, they could use that debit card and now take that $500 you're using on groceries and use it on anything they want. And, I asked those questions to those particular people, and they didn't really have an answer. So it was a terrible program to begin with. It's, a start of socialism in a way to try to drive socialism. And in the end, there's no way property tax dollars would ever hold up to do it. I'm fearful that some of these towns actually think that they could and would try it. So it's kind of why I took it and ran, and it was fun.
Yeah, I think those are good points. It would create a massive entitlement, which would then be a major burden on property taxpayers and local governments. But I want to ask you the question, because I thought you did a fantastic job during the floor debate of this. And one argument that is being made, not just here in Iowa, but in other states. I'm from Minnesota originally, and they're actually looking at state legislation to do this. But a number of cities are saying that UBI actually helps people out of poverty, and in a sense, it's going to they're not going to spend that money on foolish things. They're going to spend it on groceries and so forth responsibly. Did you find that kind of in looking at this? In terms of your research on this, did you agree with that, or?
There's no way for them to know that.
Yeah,
it's just a talking point for them to say that. Surprising that Minnesota actually wants to do something like that. We did look a little bit into Minnesota. I mean, they've blown their budget to nothing. Yeah. I mean, it's terrible. They had a surplus, now they're going to have a deficit. I mean, you can't prove that they're going to do that, and you can't prove that the money that they're going to have is going to do that. And I did say it on the floor. I mean, we've created $22 trillion worth of things for poverty.
Yes,
and spent that kind of money, and we've got zero results.
I thought that was a great point you made, because I immediately thought of Lyndon Johnson's War on Poverty and the Great Society, and we spent trillions on poverty, and we still have the problem.
Yeah,
and that
we were around here in the office sort of griping about this. I mean, we certainly didn't go so far as actually come to the Capitol and talk to you about it, which we probably should have, but we thought you had the issue in good hands, so we just sat back and got mad about it. But we talked about this. Entitlements or government assistance has always been done at the federal and state level. And yet this isn't just a little bit of socialism here. This is a radical departure to actually start trying to deliver benefits like this deal. I mean, there's certain things that are administered at the local level, right? I mean, we used to do mental health care and whatever. But I mean, this is to actually fund and try and provide this. It's just dramatic that this would even be attempted.
And in the hard part, I sit back and look at it and say, I've grown in the last 2 years. And I think going back and looking at city councils, when you look at this stuff, if you start creating these type of entitlements, it will flow across the state quickly and it will raise property taxes quickly. Because most city council people aren't there. It's not their job. They're not used to having people show up. You get 200 people in the room telling you all want an entitlement, you're going to start seeing some moderate conservative people start flipping on that because they just don't really want to have 200 people in there yelling at them. And it's a bad idea. And all of the studies that are out there that they claim are great are all spun stories.
Yeah. I want to come back to the public input thing after we get off this, because I think that's a really important point about people responding to the public input. But yeah, you spoke at that about that a lot in your comments about it. Whenever we have one of these studies, you know what you're getting, right? Yeah. I mean, they're not going to create a study or a pilot project that doesn't give them the results they're looking for at the front end, right?
Yep. It's the funny thing is we used to have traffic studies when I was local government. Find out whether or not you want a traffic light. You can get a traffic engineer to tell you need a traffic light or you don't need a traffic light. It's whoever's paying for this particular study and who wants a traffic. Right. That's the way studies work.
Yeah. So. Well, and we're seeing that now. A lot of communities, I've seen some around the metro here that are doing their community input studies, right? And, fill out your survey. Which one of the wonderful benefits do we provide do you think is the most awesome? Yep. And the option is never cut my property taxes. It's always go build something else new, right? And so you get the data and you're armed with a new mandate from the people to go build more stuff. So
and that's, I mean, it's the way that they put the surveys out. That's when I was on local government, I actually made them give me the survey because it's all in how you ask the question on what you're going to get to. I mean, if you actually add that onto your list, you want lower property taxes, I will tell you they will all say yes.
Yes. Yeah. So, and we have survey data. I mean, we've tested this both ITR Foundation, Des Moines Register. The Iowans want their taxes cut.
Oh yeah.
So, and we'll come back to that too. But another point, and I think you touched on this a while earlier. You can call it a pilot program, whatever you want, but it's really hard to end a government program. And
closest thing to internal life.
Yeah. Right. Well, and I think, because I'd like to hear a little bit more of your thoughts on, as you went through the process beyond just, a debate on the floor, one of the criticisms was, well, we've already started this. We can't stop in the middle of it. Right. I mean, well, you're also going to argue that we can't stop at the end of it either.
Yeah.
So
I think that's the way I kind of looked at it. It wasn't my closing remarks. I had to kind of skip around on my closing remarks. I got point of ordered a few times.
Yeah, it was awesome.
I got a few times, and I actually had to skip an entire page in my closing remarks because I'm like, there's probably 3 points on that particular page alone.
Yeah.
And I mentioned it in that. I think we're actually looking after the property taxpayer. It's a shame that we have to at the state level. And when people talk about local control, it's the most frustrating thing in the world because local control exists where state law doesn't. And I don't think in the history of the state of Iowa, any legislative body up there thought that people would give away money for nothing. And essentially in a way where you're giving away money for not working or working and just dropping into the kitty and thinking that you could just continue to pass that out. So the local control part was never an issue for me, and it never has been since I've been there. Because, again, coming from local government, their availability is where state law doesn't exist.
Yeah,
I think one thing that surprised me was just how widespread this is. I mean, I heard of the Uplift program in Iowa, but then when you're reading articles in Wall Street Journal and seeing this happening nationwide is just quite incredible to see this. basically this massive dose of socialism that is expanding across the nation. And one thing that concerned me too is, during COVID, we saw with all the generous stimulus dollars, there was a lot of people that just stayed home and didn't work. And so I was fearful that if localities do this, if states start doing this, and even the federal government, one, it's not going to replace existing welfare programs because that's doubtful they're going to replace that. But also, to me, that's going to be a disincentive for people not to work. And one of the big issues here in Iowa, I think a bipartisan issue, is workforce. And I think if you start disincentivizing people from working, that creates a problem.
Yeah, I mean, there's another side to it that the Democrats really didn't like, because when you sit back and you talk about disincentivizing work, that's one side of it. The other side is you could actually be incentivizing lower wages.
That's true, yeah.
That's why when you sit back, they said, oh, well, all these private companies are in it. I'm like, well, I mean, they could be disincentivizing, higher wages, because if they got people getting $500 from the government, eventually they can back out of this deal because they won't continue to give to it, and they can incentivize a lower wage.
That's a great point.
Yeah, and I know Senator Buslow made that point really well on the floor as well, who was on that subcommittee with you. And no, you guys nailed that.
That was pretty funny. So Buslow was sitting there, so I can give a little bit of inside baseball. He was sitting there, and I looked at him. I said, "You going to talk?" And he's like, "Well, one more person talks." One more person got up, and way his button went, and I'm like, "Oh, this is going to be fun."
Yeah.
And Buslow talking's always fun. We're desk mates next to each other. Like I said, both from Eastern Iowa. Talk to him a lot, so it's kind of fun to banter back and forth.
Yeah. I was just thinking that, is he from Bettendorf?
He's from Davenport. Actually. His dad lives in my district.
Yeah. I represented a suburban district. There aren't as many suburban Republicans left, and yet I think you can kind of understand some of what goes on, and it's different, right? I mean, it's good. I think it's good to have somebody like Buslow with you, because you guys can at least have similar experiences of what's going on in your communities.
Yeah, and at the same time, I think we're starting to get them back. I think the suburban, when you're talking about taxes and stuff like that, I think that's where you get suburban Iowa back. And we're starting to pick up those seats, and I think we'll continue to pick them up. I think, Iowa is a red state. We have to continue to work hard. We have to continue to raise money. We have to continue to knock doors. But I think we're getting suburban Iowa back in really good, sound hands. It was at one point in time, went back, blew there for a while in the 2008 kind of area. But I think we're starting to get it back. I mean, I think my seat, Buslow's seat, we're going to work hard on getting Brad's on there.
Yep.
So I think, we're getting those. Yeah. Dawson's the suburban seat.
Yeah,
kinda.
I agree with that. I think, for example, you'll see the Ankeny House seats. So Buslow's the senator. Both of his House members are, but it's always close. Those seats flip back and forth, and there's a lot of the Quad City seats that seem to kind of go back and forth a little bit now too. So
that's knocking Mike right there. I mean, we were keeping track of who was knocking more doors, and I was trying to keep up as fast as I can. So I do get to give him a little chunk that I won by 13 points, though.
Yeah. I know both you guys worked really hard, so it's a healthy competition, right?
I think that's what you want there. If you want conservative people coming back, you're going to want people, working hard. Because if you don't work hard, any of us can lose a seat.
Yeah. I want to. So, what's your perspective of? We talked a little bit about the suburbs. What's your perspective of the political climate broadly in Iowa? And you're welcome to even go back. I mean, you've been in the state Senate for 2 years, but you've been active for a long time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, where do you think we're really at here?
I think we're in a good place. I mean, I think we're continuing on the climate side of things to do the right things. And, I'll take it on the Senate side of things. Jack is probably the world's greatest leader. He leads us in the right direction. He tells us what to do on certain items when you have questions. And, that's what you need there. And I think that's, as a rookie, if I would have came in and not had the leadership of Jack and, all the staff members that are there, that helps a lot. But the climate out there, I think, is they want government to get kind of off people's backs. And they're seeing what's happening on the national side and sitting there saying, we don't want that. Now, I have a little bit of a latitude where I'm at, directly across the river is Illinois.
Yeah.
So my constituents see that and say, well, we don't want that. So, we got to, continue to message good and get that message out there to people. And I think overall the climate in the end will be good. We'll see how the elections go this year, but I think you're going to see a really good working effort from all of us. I'll be out knocking doors for, everybody I can, Don Driscoll, Dawson, Dawn, everybody. Yeah. So climate, I think, is good.
Yeah, we were talking through some of the Senate seats yesterday here in the office, and even if things are where they've been at for the last 2 or 3 cycles, you guys are in really good shape.
We are.
And it could be, it could improve from here. I don't think it's impossible for you guys to add more seats for it, which is insane to think about. But
well, the other side of the aisle is helping too. When they're coming up with ideas like UBI and really bad policy ideas.
Well,
although UBI was a bipartisan bill.
I saw that.
It's a bipartisan bill.
I also too. It's they do struggle. It seems like the opponents with a consistent message. We talked about this. They thought they were being clever and trying to somehow go after farm subsidies. Well, of all the hand-wringing that's gone on the left about we can't compete in rural Iowa anymore, I'm not sure that going after farmers and what they need to survive is really the winning message to penetrate in some of these districts. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't understand what makes rural Iowans tick, John. I don't know you, but let's go after the farm bill, right?
Yeah, that's. I don't understand, and we were talking in the last podcast about the Register's editorial about the governor and her handpicked legislature and the extremist agenda, but to me, I think the last few elections demonstrate that Iowans are in agreement with what the governor and what this legislature is doing. Even the Register's own poll, like we were talking about, 62%, overwhelming majority, over 60% wanted the income tax to be phased out, to be eliminated.
Yeah, it's always interesting when they say handpicked. I didn't have any conversation with the governor before I decided to run, so I think it's interesting that they, it's a newspaper, so how often do they actually use any factual type information?
It's Iowa's paper record. Come on,
yeah.
It's definitely not so much truthful anymore. And the weird thing was I did kind of say that on page 2 of my closing remarks that I didn't get to actually say. Back to UBI a little bit, they're going to spin that. The newspaper's going to spin that as that being a great thing. And I sat back and looked at it as a city council person. I want to know if each one of those city council people are putting that on their campaign report, because essentially they're buying votes. And I think that's why you see it across the nation.
Yeah.
It goes back to, I'm pretty sure it was LBJ, and I don't know if they 100% know that he said it, but, the more programs that you put out there, in the end, you're going to get people to vote for you and, those entitlements. So I think that's what's going on with that. And I think the newspapers are biting into that. Now, back home, I'm starting to see the last couple stories come out. I don't know if they're, the editor's gone or what, but he's starting to actually give us some pretty good, press as far as what we're doing. So I think they're figuring out, hopefully, and a lot slower than most, that they're writing outside of what the general public really thinks.
Yeah.
So,
and based on, you have a business background, so we're going to have the substantial tax cut, 3.8%. Next year. How do you think that'll help businesses and taxpayers across Iowa?
Well, it's going to help employment. I'll tell you that. The idea that you get that income tax down as low as you can, of course, we all want to get it always lower. But I think Iowa's done the right thing and made sure that we've done it in a conservative fashion, so we don't have to, whipsaw back. It's kind of what we get yelled at about the school funding all the time. They want us to just fund more, and, last time that happened and the Democrats had control, they had to pull it back. So we want to make sure on the property tax or on the income tax that we're doing that correctly. And Senator Dawson's great at it. So it's great to have people there that you can kind of follow their lead and you can understand it. I'm a numbers guy. I'm a business guy too. So I understand it pretty quickly. But it's another thing that makes our caucus so great is there's somebody who's an expert in each individual area. It's not like everybody has to be an expert in everything. That's smart. That's good for us. So, Klamish is a big energy guy. Buslow knows state government real well. I'm home builder, remodeling type guy, business guy. You got Knoyer, who came from a school board. So, you got a lot of different people there in the farmers, where you can go lean on them. When it comes to a farming question, I go talk to Don Driscoll and Rosenboom and people like that and see exactly what's going on there. So our caucus is great with that stuff too.
You do have a really strong caucus, and I think we've consistently said that. And you guys are, and I'll give Whitver credit on this too. I mean, because it's no secret how highly I think of him, but he's really good at giving a vision of where you guys are trying to get to. And it's not necessarily his vision. It's, this is what this caucus believes and stands for, and therefore this is what we're going. And I'm guessing that you probably caught that from a pretty early time walking in that room 2 years ago.
Yeah, I caught exactly that. The oddity is he's never been wrong for me. The time where you're like, is this the right thing to do? He's like, it's the right thing to do. This is why. Explains it to you, goes through it. And he's never been wrong.
Yeah.
So how can you not, follow and listen to a guy who's never been wrong? A great mentor, great leader.
Yep.
So that's really what makes it so easy. Is that you got Mary up there, and you got Caleb and Larissa, and those guys all take care of your role well. And then your caucus staff we're just blessed with everything that we have.
You guys got a really strong team.
We do.
So we talked about taxes, UBI, all the good stuff you guys did. What do you think? I'm going to close with kind of two broad questions. What do you think this election, legislative races, understanding you're not on the ballot, what do you think will decide these swing seats? You talked about Driscoll or Dawson or, Brad Zahn. What's going to decide those races this year?
Work and messaging. I mean, I think that's, my election was, it's work, messaging, raise money. Message good, talk to people, be out there and knock those doors, and that's what helps. I mean, that's what got me where I am, and I followed that lead, being told that. So I think a good percentage of it is work. It's how hard you work, and Booslo's the easiest example.
Yeah.
With two Democrats in the House down below him, and him being elected there by 800 some votes. Yep. So it's work.
Yep, absolutely. John, you got questions?
I want to ask if you could comment briefly on the, because we think it's a big deal, the two taxpayer protection amendments that are moving through.
Love it.
The 2/3 majority and the protecting the flat tax. Could you maybe just give a few comments on those?
Well, on the 2/3 majority, I love it. I love the availability for us to change the Constitution. I love the availability for people to be able to vote on it. I think that one should be pretty easy to get through. At the same time, taxes should be very hard to raise. It should be very, very hard to raise. We had that, I believe, in my last couple of years at City Council. If you needed to raise taxes, you had to have 2/3 vote. I think income tax should be the same way. I find it amazing that Democrats can't vote on that. They can't vote on the availability for people to be able to make that choice, and I think that's odd. And then the other one's a flat tax, huge flat tax supporter. So, that one is going to be a big one for us, and to continue to keep that there, because we know that if the winds ever turn the other way, that taxes are going up, and they're going to tax all the way across the board. And it's going to be hurtful to our economy, hurtful to our workers, hurtful to our businesses. So the idea that we can get that there and hopefully get that voted through, love the idea.
Yep.
Yeah, we were talking about I think it might have been the last podcast or another one about the possibility of a wealth tax, which a lot of progressive blue states are doing now.
Yeah,
I mean that's pretty dangerous.
It'll kill our farmers.
Yeah,
I mean, the idea that they're farming probably isn't much different than developing, at least from what I hear. They're typically asset rich and cash poor because they reinvest all that stuff back into their particular farm ground, and or they have bad years. So as a developer, if they sit back and say, I want to tax all your wealth, I don't necessarily want to tax your income, then you're going to tax all my rental properties, and guess what's going to happen to rents? Rents are going to go up. Cost of living is going to go up. The way it's going to work, we saw it through COVID, and that's what caused a lot of these rent things. And what does it do? Hurts poverty.
Yeah. Could I ask one more question? Just as
John's
a
always got one more question. I'll warn you.
I got all day
because you're involved in building and stuff. And so I was having a conversation earlier today. A lot of times renters will say property taxes don't impact me. Is that true?
That is not true.
Okay.
Absolutely not true. I mean, property taxes are a direct result. Every time property taxes on a particular house goes up, you're going to raise them on your particular rents.
Yeah.
In my case, I actually look at it a year over year. We'll lower it too. Property taxes go lower. We'll lower the rent because it's just a cost of doing goods.
Yeah.
COGS, cost of goods sold, is something that Democrats typically don't understand. They don't understand when your costs of those goods go up, sales price goes up. Oddly, in home building, we've ran a couple of bills this year that help make homes more affordable. What they don't understand is I'm actually fighting against a higher wage for me because I made our cost of goods go down, which means our margin stays the same and we make less money, but more people can afford them and more people can get into them. I think housing is where America builds its wealth and has over a period of time. And more we have the availability to get people in homes, the better off we are. So now we got to get the federal government to get the interest rates a little lower.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. Maybe spend less money.
Right now, we are satisfied with you making great progress at the state level, but if you can figure out inflation and undo what's going on with Biden's economy, we're all in for that too. So.
Let the Senate Republicans in the Iowa Senate Republicans run the federal government for about 6 months. We'll have it all figured out for you.
If Washington, D.C. worked a lot more like Iowa, this country would be a far better place.
And I think that's one of the hidden secrets of Iowa that doesn't give enough credit is the conservative budgeting. Yeah. And that it's always hard to say no. And that's Calvin Coolidge is one of my favorite presidents. And
John's our historian here.
And he was known to say no, and that's very hard to do because it's always easy from the other side. I mean, they always, their token word is investment. We need to invest in education. We need to invest in this and that, and then they want higher taxes to pay for it. And as you said, look at Illinois, look at Minnesota, New York, California. That tax and spend agenda doesn't work, and Iowa's done a very good job of not only pro-growth tax reforms but also keeping a line on the spending, and that's something that local governments need to learn too.
Yeah, I mean, it's the hardest thing. And I will tell you, because when you're on a city council, it's hard to say no because those people are on you consistently to want more and want more and want more. I will tell you that I was pretty adamant most of the time when I was there saying, well, you want more, are you willing to pay more property taxes? And when the answer is no, it's like, okay, well, here's what we got to do. I was there and we opened a couple firehouses, which, cost money. But in the end, I always said the first things we're supposed to do is public safety and public works. Those, public safety first, public works second. And if that's the place where we have to add something, that's the place where we have to add something. At the state government, it's a lot easier, I think. I'm not on a budget necessarily as a budget chair, but our budget chairs do a good job, especially in the Senate. We're always very, very conservative as we can be. And I enjoy watching the process. Someday I may be there on one of those budget committees to know what it's like to say no more often. But, right now I just say, yes, I want that bill and let's run it.
Wow.
Sometimes I get good ones.
No, it's great. And, it speaks well of you that you went and sought that bill out, and we appreciate it.
Well, that was probably the most fun I've had since I've been there. Just the prep for that, because I knew what the other side was going to do. Tony B was definitely not happy with me when I took it.
We noticed.
So I don't think he's talked to me since.
Wow.
But that, it was fun. It was the right bill to have and the right process to get it through, and we got it there. I had the defense for the farm stuff, and that was a big thing that we needed to make sure that those farmers out there working hard every day.
Well, I said I was going to. We want to be respectful of your time, so I'm going to kind of land the plane here. But if you have time over the next few months, I would like to explore further this idea of getting a lot of folks showing up at local government meetings, because, and I don't know how often I know you've listened to the show before, but we've been spending a lot of time and a lot of organizational energy on trying to make more progress at the local level for exactly that reason, is that when people actually show up, you're going to respond to that, right? I mean, if you had 20 people show up at a city council meeting, that's a groundswell of support. You need to be responsive to that.
Yep.
Now, we tried to do that in Dallas County. Several of us went out, and Dallas County went ahead and raised our property taxes anyway. But it's still, they had to notice us. And so I'd like to get, maybe you can touch on that a little bit, but what can we do to get people to engage at the local level. And I'm talking about fiscal conservatives at the local level. Make your pitch there.
I think the easiest way to do it, and we did some of this, and we're probably going to have to change it a little bit. Senator Dawson did this with the property tax reform bill where they get the individualized statements.
Yeah, it needs work.
I think that individualized statement needs to be individualized, not based upon a $100,000 house. Now, my city particularly did it online for just the city taxes. And so you could go online, you could type your address in, and they were raising their taxes 26, 36, or 46 cents. Now they hired 6 new firefighters. Oddly enough, at 46 cents, my house didn't even go up because of the rollback amount. But I think what you need to do is get that individualized information into people's hands. They did actually have people show up at that particular meeting. And I will tell you, the 8 years that I was there, nobody was ever showing up for the budget. So the idea of getting that individualized information to them is big.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly right. That is really encouraging to hear about that, because we are big believers in that. And we think from the outset that notification was always supposed to be, what does it mean to me? Because as a homeowner, you don't care about the levy rate. You don't care about, they're important numbers. You don't care about your assessed value. I mean, some folks do. What really matters is how much am I cutting the check for?
Yep.
And tell people what that is.
And that's the hard part because of the rollback and everything else. Yep. I mean, the city property taxes are very, very confusing. We didn't raise the levy quite a few times, but people ended up paying more in taxes. Right. And, some other people didn't because their assessment went down. So I think trying to get to a better individualized system there, I think Dawson has a good, conversation as to where he thinks that may go.
Yeah.
Kind of follow his lead, kind of give him my points of view and see where it goes. The problem with the one that's going out there now is it's not very individualized, and it's about $40,000 per county, I believe, to send that out. So it's, it's more taxpayer dollars to go out that way. I think if we can figure out a way someday to get that electronic so that people can get there, more and more people are on the electronic method anyways. And if they could do it countywide, not citywide, it'd be great.
There's always ways to look at streamlining it. I don't hear as many complaints from cities and counties about sending out the actual bills in the mail as I do sending out the notifications on how much the bill is going to be. But hey,
that's that's very true. And I have a house in Florida that I go to occasionally, and that particular house gets a individualized statement before the meeting. So Florida has a really good method of doing it. And they also have Florida Save My Home, which is kind of a cool property tax deal where you can't go up more than 3% as long as you own that house. So it's kind of a great process down there, and I think we'll continue to work on property tax.
Yeah, even Minnesota has an individualized statement. And we've seen some examples of that. Well, this is great, but we do need to try and land the airplane, John, because you've got a lot of important business to attend to today, I'm sure. So, but this is great. So here in conclusion, was the experience worthwhile coming in here and sitting on the podcast?
It was. I was told there was going to be red carpet. I did not check the carpet on the way in.
We have boring gray walls. But we got you Coca-Cola and hopefully.
Coca-Cola works. I did in my research for UBI. The funny thing was I got to. I had to figure out what the difference was in between our Senate floor and the federal Senate floor, and I did find out the federal Senate floor has blue carpet, and we have red. So I think that was in some of my remarks, too, because they were arguing about the stuff. So
okay. Well, very good.
Back to the red carpet stuff.
All right. Well, Senator Webster, thanks for joining us. This was terrific.
Thank you. Hopefully I get to come back sometime.
Yeah, hopefully you do, and so we'll have to make that happen already. Well, all right. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks again, John, Senator Webster, for joining us. All of you out there, don't forget to like and subscribe. And with all of that, we will see you next time on ITR Live.